You said something about it's okay to set boundaries without explanation. Could you touch that and maybe give an example or two?
Did you have any challenges or specific strategies to make sure that you were still kind of fostering the fatherly relationship? It's like, you're gone, now you come back and you're telling me what to do.
What's it like raising kids that just have such a different economic situation from you? What they're growing up with versus what you grew up with?
Welcome to Dad Pod. I'm Mike.
And I'm Luke. We're friends here in Madison, and we both have kids. And at least for us, becoming a dad has been transformational. We talk to all sorts of dads in all sorts of situations to learn from their unique challenges, lessons, and evolutions. The goal is simple: learn from each other to become better dads.
If you dig it, please find us on Apple or Spotify and click follow. That single click helps put us in front of more dads, which Luke would really appreciate.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of Dad Pod. I am so excited to introduce to you Raju as a first-time guest. Raju's father was a first-generation immigrant, where he learned lessons of perseverance, working hard, and true entrepreneurship. He went on to MIT, where he worked at Bell Labs before it became AT&T, where he met his incredible wife. He's the only man I know who has talked about karate kicking his now wife at work, and it resulted in neither being fired or dumped by his wife. He then went on to found 3 different companies, after which he went to the dark side, where he worked first at Sigma Ventures before joining RRE as a general partner. He's made investments and sat on boards at dozens of technology companies, which is where we met. Most importantly, Raju has 4 incredible children with his partner and wife. Raju, you are proof that good things can come out of New Jersey. We're so excited
to be determined. To be determined.
So to jump in, I'd first love to hear, what were the big things you learned from your father? And how did the way you were fathered by him impact the way you father your children?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to jump into that. And I am going to say this, but I really do feel like you invited me to this podcast as a contrast to the good dads. And when people see the bottom, they aspire. They're like, they feel better about themselves. You know what I mean? So I'm here to let the world feel confidence.
Can be a dad.
Set low standards. So that we can exceed them.
And I'll just make one correction. I met my wife in high school, not in college.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we went to high school together. So
wow.
That's a great thing, by the way, because she knows all of my friends and everyone does. Like through history. So it's really good. So it's a good question. Learning from my dad. People don't know my father's story, but I'll maybe start there a little bit just to give people a bit of background.
Great.
I'm first generation as well. So I was born in India, and I was a couple years old. And my dad, tough environment in India. He was married, had 2 kids. It was my sister and I. And he was living with his father, and life wasn't really great. I got to be candid. My father's mom had died many years ago, and my grandfather had remarried. And, so the new mother was just, she was tough on the kids that were not hers. There was like 7 of them that were not hers and 6 of them that were hers. So there was 13 in that family. Oh, wow. And so, my dad was the oldest of all of them. And when he, got married, you kind of have to move in with your father's, sort of groom's parents, and they did, and we had kids, and sort of my step-grandmother, I guess, was giving my mom and my dad a real hard time, and he didn't see a real pathway out. He was well educated. He had 2 degrees in economics in India. Spoke English really well. He worked at the U.S. Embassy with the hopes that he could get a visa to the United States. And this story can be like a 4-hour story, so I'm going to make it shorter. Needless to say, like one day he met someone in the embassy who people mistook for a bum, and he kind of took care of them and told them to clean up. And the guy was like actually an important business person and knew the head of the embassy. And lo and behold, my dad gets a visa to the United States. And, he's a little nervous, frankly, because one, never been, and it would be a big disruption. And two, he had no money. He didn't have the money to go. So he's pensively having tea at a local tea shop, and a friend of his walks by, and he sees him and he says, "Prem, you look so pensive. What's going on?" He goes, I just got a visa to the United States, and I want to go, but I can't afford it. And so his friend says, "This is crazy. I just took a job at Air France, and we have a new program called Fly Now, Pay Later. And, sort of like this installment plan for flying." And he goes, "I'll get you into the program." So my dad flies to America, doesn't know anyone, leaves us behind. And so because he leaves, we can actually move out of his parents' house. And we move in with my mom's parents in Punjab. So we're there, and he lands in the United States, and he doesn't know anyone. So he literally sleeps on a park bench. And this kind lady walks past him several times and notices him and says, "Hey, you're sitting here in a suit and you're sleeping on a park bench. What's going on?" And he kind of explains the story. He's embarrassed, and some guardian angel stuff here. But she invites him to stay with her, and then ultimately teaches him how to read a paper and find a job. And comes with $12 in his pocket, and he eats at Nathan's every day. And because Nathan's has 3 hot dogs for $1, and so he gets 3 hot dogs, loads them up, eats one, keeps 2 in his pocket, and goes on job interviews. And most people don't want to hire him because he's got a weird visa. It's not really a work visa, I guess. And so finally he winds up at this store, a Panasonic store, which is pretty disheveled, and the manager just needs help and doesn't care, and he hires him. And the short story on that is he gets 17 promotions, and ultimately retires as a vice president of advertising at Matsushita, which is the parent company of Panasonic. But all through that pathway, he only gets, his promotions don't really give him too much more money, and so it took him a few years to earn enough money to basically pay for my mom, my sister, and I to fly to the United States. And so we fly, we grow up in New York, and really kind of, tough neighborhoods, and, started out in Rego Park, Queens, and then we went to Co-op City, Bronx, where, kind of had to run home so you didn't get beat up, and really didn't have a lot of money for most of our life, frankly. And then finally, my mom forced him to move to New Jersey so that we would survive as kids, I guess, was sort of the long and short of it. And, in New Jersey, we kind of prospered, and, ultimately, I met my wife there, obviously, so she's 2 years younger. But so I think that background's important to understand, context around my father and what he did that was great and what he did that, it wasn't so great. But he felt a tremendous responsibility to provide for his family, and I do too, right. Which is a double-edged sword. I didn't see my dad a lot for many years. He took jobs that he didn't want to take because, he just had to make ends meet. And he was all the time sending money back to India as well. So, this was kind of a combination factor. But, that sort of responsibility to take care of the family is super tight with me, right? Like that is a lesson that, I've sort of embraced, and I think my kids know that, and, they've kind of embraced it. But the flip side is, you kind of work a lot. And, my journey's weird because I didn't make tremendous amount of money throughout. I mean, I was an executive at Lucent, so it was good money, but it wasn't like life-changing great money. And it started propagating and getting better with time. But, sort of that perseverance and making sure that you provide was, super strong and I think positive. But the negative is, I wasn't there for everything. He also believed that not every moment is a teaching moment, which I kind of love that lesson. Sometimes you just need to listen. Sometimes you just need to set boundaries without explanation. And sometimes you need to teach. And, I think this is how I stray a little bit from my wife. My wife thinks every moment is a teaching moment. Like every tiny moment is a teaching moment. And, it puts a lot of pressure on the kids. The reality is it's not all teaching moments. Sometimes you just have to sit and step back and say, just be compassionate and listen. And they just want to get something off their chest. They just want somebody to be there for them. They don't want to necessarily be educated that they've made a mistake, and some mistakes are bigger than others. And so that was an important lesson I learned from him. And then he also taught me to be really focused on the long term and not the short term. Just the amount of time and effort it took him to get to the United States, and the amount of time and effort it took him to get to the place where he ultimately retired, and he instilled that in me because, it's a weird story. Like I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. So, when I was in elementary school, junior high school, we didn't go to restaurants. And then eventually when I got to high school, I started working. And, as a senior in high school, I had a job at a restaurant. I actually started, as a crazy story. I started out as a dishwasher, actually. And 1 week into the dishwashing, the short order cook doesn't show up. So they say, can you cook? And I said, no. And they said, well, you're cooking. So
you can tonight.
You're on tonight. And so I get in there and I start, and he's like, the burgers that are well done go in the back. That's where the grease flows. And, the burgers in the front, they're going to be, more rare because the grease isn't there. And, this is how you kind of make a, tuna melt and, all sorts of stuff. So, and I'm a quick study. That's one of my sort of fortes. And so got really good at it. And a week later, the, short order cook shows back up and they say to him, sorry, you got no job because this kid's better. And so I'm cooking. And so I got into college and I give my 2 weeks notice, kind of ready, right when I'm ready to leave. And, listeners know I went to MIT. So it wasn't like a nothing college, it was something. And so I go to the manager and I say, hey, I'm going to give my 2 weeks notice. And he says, no, we can't give you 2 weeks notice. He says, you have the properties to be a manager at this store. And I can make you assistant manager, not now, but soon, but I can actually raise your pay. And he slides this piece of paper across the table and I'm looking at it. It's like how much I could make a year full time. I'm like, whoa. And I'm like blown away. So I'm go home. I go to my dad. I'm like, hey, I don't know if I should do the college thing. And he's like, listen, this journey that you're going to take in the sort of food business is not going to be the journey you're going to take in real life, by going to MIT.
Do you remember the dollar amount?
I don't. I wish I did, because it would be so paltry that it would convey my age. And so I'm trying to look younger every day. I work out, So anyway, those are the lessons, right? Like every moment's not a teaching moment. You got to provide for your family, focus on the long term, not the short term, those things. And, the biggest, he didn't teach me by teaching me. I just observed, which was you have to take risk. He took a huge risk coming to the United States. Didn't know a soul, didn't know if he could eat, didn't have the money, had an installment plan and made it work. Risk is super, super important. And it's one of the things I convey to my kids. I'll talk more about that later if you want, but I believe in calculated risks. I don't believe in just arbitrary risks.
Thinking about the risk that he took and the sacrifice that goes into the leap of faith that he made, moving across the world, new culture, no money, and probably no idea how it's going to work out or how he's going to make it happen. As his son, and then looking at your family, and and he made it work. So did you have to almost? I could see a feeling like, how do I live up to that? Like what he did for his family, especially once you have kids, you realize the emotional journey that he must have gone on. Like, did you have to kind of process through that at all? It's like, or was it just like, hey, he did this great thing and I'm really thankful?
Yeah, I think it was the latter. I didn't really kind of sit there and say I had to live up to that. I don't know if you can. The circumstances were different. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I'll say this, but like, they were thinking about suicide at one point. My mom and my dad, and my mom's just like such a family person. She's like, no, this can't work, right? So it was so broken that he had to make it happen. Something he needed to change. That's an impetus I don't have in life, right? I'm not sitting here
Right.
saying like some things are so broken that I need to make that radical of a change. So listen, there's a ton of appreciation for. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast right now if he wasn't there. I might actually, because I do believe in so many inflection points in life that you
Hmm.
kind of are where you are meant to be. So I might be here. In fact, I think I would be. This is a big inflection point in my life, this podcast. So, you know, but
Hear
nonetheless,
that,
like,
listeners?
yeah,
To go back to one of the things you said that I haven't heard expressed, but I do relate to, you said something about it's okay to set boundaries without explanation.
yeah.
Could you touch that and maybe give an example or two?
I think sometimes kids are looking for boundaries. They're fighting you, and the boundary is just an expression of love. And that's really what it is. Because you care enough to, just sort of put an end to something. And they push back and fight hard against that boundary, but they really want it and they need it. And
Totally.
so, that's what I'm talking about. There are examples where you kind of see your kids and they're, becoming self-destructive in some manner, and you just say, we're done. Like, I don't need to explain this, but this is not going to happen anymore. And you because reason is not like, they're not looking for a reason, they're looking for that expression of love, which is, you are protecting
Totally.
me and you care enough to set these boundaries. My kids are older, right? So I've got, just so you guys know, 26, 24, 22, and then 15. So I've been through a lot of stuff. Sometimes you set those boundaries without, sort of saying something. Sometimes that there's a kid who's a really bad influence on your child.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to go through and explain it, but basically create one of two kinds of boundaries. You just make excuses why you can't ever see that kid when they're younger. We're busy, we got this to go. And then, the relationship wanes. Or you just, basically say, we're not going to focus
That's
on
it.
you spending time with that child. Because
Yeah.
as much as parenting is an influence, peer-to-peer stuff is super influential in people. That's why you guys are doing the podcast together, right? And you're not doing
That's
it with
right.
your parents, Luke. You know?
There may have been requests to be a part of it, but they've not been granted yet.
Okay.
The one thing the one thing that I think a lot about in this world of setting boundaries and explaining versus not explaining is I actually think it's important. Something I think a lot about is the world isn't fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of, I see this in my wife, I see this in a lot of parents. They feel like they need to justify and explain and rationalize everything to kids. And they're often, every now and then we'll use the term boundary. I set a boundary and it's just because.
Just because.
And it's to remind them every now and then. Sometimes shit just happens.
Yeah. Like, I have rules.
And
Like,
you might not,
yeah.
right. And you might like it, you might not like it. But that's how the world works.
Yeah.
There's not a real time
You,
tally.
you don't have to justify everything. Like, they know when I sit in
Yeah.
this particular chair, they need to get me a beer. That's no.
Fast.
Yeah.
It's like that
Yeah.
Labatt Blue commercial.
Yeah. I don't have to justify it. The beer just shows up in my hand. That's the way it's done.
Did you go through the example that you mentioned of the child having a friend that is influential in a way that you don't like? Was that something that you specifically went through with
Yeah. Oh,
one
yeah.
or more
Oh,
of,
yeah.
of your kids?
I
And
think there's
so how did
nothing I
you
haven't gone through. No, that's not true.
did
There's lots I haven't gone through. But yes, that absolutely happened a couple times.
and so were the two strategies that you mentioned, is that basically the two ways that
Yeah,
you addressed it? Or
100%.
because that's something that I have a 2-year-old, but I've found myself pondering, like what do you do when an eighth grader's hanging out with someone
Yeah.
that's
Like at 2, we never did that, right?
well,
I
yeah,
mean, this,
but as a teenager,
yeah.
that person has their own opinions. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I'm just kind of curious how because there's, like you mentioned, there's the kind of negotiation route. There's trying to explain it. So I'm interested in that example because it's a fear that I
Yeah.
have looking
Oh,
toward my
you'll experience
future.
it for sure. There's an expression that says the best way to diet is not to have something in your house that you would eat, not to, kind of train yourself not to eat it. Just don't have it around. I think the reality is, that happens with kids as well. And, you can teach them all the good principles in life and, hope they're going to just leverage all the things that you've taught them and become wonderful people. But like that doesn't always happen. So sometimes you got to just keep the potato chips away. And that's the tactics I've used. In some cases it's like where it's really obvious, it's like, nope, not a friend anymore. And then when it's not so obvious, just subtly making it hard
Right.
to meet that person.
What type of friction did you face, or did you have pushback, or?
Yeah. There was friction. There was like, why, all the other people, yada, yada, yada. But like, that's why I said, you don't, sometimes you got to set boundaries without explaining yourself. And it's okay. Like, your kids need to understand that. There's different stages you going through with your kids too, which I can talk a lot about, right? There's like, and I like a lot of people talk to me, I'm having a kid. I know you had 4, like, can you help me out? And I have like, well, my lessons, and there's a tip section I could just publish it probably. I'll give it to you. Like, I have like 5 or 6 tips. But like one thing is, you're going to be a different kind of, you don't necessarily love every stage of parenting, right? Like people say like, oh, I don't know what, like something's wrong with me. I don't love my baby, they're just vomiting and, change diaper. I don't love that stage, but like there's different stages that you're going to love. There are going to be different stages you're better at. The reality is, at an early stage, you kind of have to say like, we have ground rules and, not necessarily have to explain them all. And if you constantly want to be a friend to your kid and just, as I said, like a big point of what you're going to hear me say is like, not everything needs to be explained. Not everything needs to be, a life lesson or a teaching moment. But some parents feel like everything needs to be justified and explained because but that's a child over there, right? They're not going to get what you have to say. They don't have a lot of the thinking, and your responsibility goes far beyond that. So, so as long as they know, like, there are going to be some rules that you set, and that's going to happen until they go to college or whatever, they just get used to it, right? A little bit. It's part of it. So, I just think like if it's something that is subtle and small, you can probably just use the avoidance path. Just don't walk past the potato chip aisle. And in other cases, it's like, don't go to the supermarket, right? You're never allowed in the supermarket. You can never buy it, so, and that's more overt. It's probably a stupid analogy.
I think it's right on.
Okay.
Because it's the temptation.
Yeah, it's
right?
a temptation.
And you mentioned something interesting there of, let's call it a habit early, that in this case, there may be rules that are just rules, and that's the line. Did you have other principles or rules that were kind of like lifelong for the kids that you would set early on? I'm curious if you had like long threads of some consistencies that you tried to set early.
Sounds like get dad a beer might be one of those.
Yeah, dad.
One of those long threads.
Get
Dad a beer.
Chair, in this chair, get a Labatt.
Now, you know what? So the reality is not everything's a teaching moment. And you really want to pick 3 or 4 life lessons that you feel are vital, not 50, right? And it's super important to reinforce those, right? And so mine wasn't even just who you hang around with. That wasn't a rule, right? That was just like opportunistic or whatever. Mine was perseverance. That's like anything good happens in life, it's because you're going to persevere. And, people who say you're a natural at X, natural is built. Natural is not really natural 90% of the time. So that was one. The second was, your siblings, right? That was like really important, right? And I'll give you stories on how this has manifested itself. Like my kids love each other. They go on vacation together, like without us. I mean, just think about that. Like they pick up the phone, like we're going to go to Rome, or Italy, or, they just went to Thailand and Singapore, with no money, but like, they just kind of went and they call each other, right? Like more than they call us. And, I'm going to be dead someday, but they're going to have their siblings, so which is fantastic. And so the third is love what you do, right? I really think that is something that I haven't really taught, but they see. And, I'll spend some cycles around what they see versus what you do and what they hear versus what you say, because you don't have to say it. And then the last is, take calculated risk, because I think without risk, some level of risk, sometimes you can never get there to do what you love and to, get the job that you want. And so, people thought I was ridiculous for leaving Lucent. I was an executive. I was going to become, I was on a track for greatness there, and stock price was, going off the charts. And, I believe in tailwinds and headwinds. That's one of my philosophies just from business. And so there was a massive headwind coming in telecom, and we all saw it, but, Lucent was still on fire. There was a massive tailwind in mobile, right? Mobile applications. And, so I quit and I joined a startup that was focusing on mobile applications when I was on the path to become like a senior officer at Lucent, and gave up a lot of money and, took a lot less and, risk of a startup. But it was a calculated risk, right? I mean, I got 2 degrees from MIT. Even if that one doesn't work out, I'm confident we'll land on my feet somewhere. So, that's kind of what I try to teach them is just, take some calculated risk, because you got to kind of, think about that a lot. So anyway, those are my 4, sort of key things that I, focus on with them and reinforce. But there's tons of other lessons that you don't have to be so overt about. They don't have to be the ones that they have to memorize.
What was your process to boil it down to those 4?
No, there's no process. There's no process.
Darts.
I'm not that, I wish I was that, sort of rigorous. There was no process. It was just like my dad taught me to take risk. I know with my kids that that's important. Like if they're in a dead end job or they want to get to something, They got to take some risk. Taking risk is maybe sometimes even like getting on stage and singing as a risk. Love what you do has always been important to me, because, that's just a thing. My sister and I are pretty close. I mean, we don't talk as much as I'd like, but that siblings thing is just, we decided to have 4 kids, and not because we wanted 4 kids, but we wanted a family unit that was going to be able. And like I have gotten nothing in my life without perseverance. So they kind of were like lessons that I had learned more than anything else. Right. That kind of were meaningful, that I kind of imparted upon them. But if they were on this podcast and asked you to name them, they probably wouldn't name these 3 or 4. Right. But I think that's ingrained in them.
What did you do to facilitate the sibling relationships?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Mostly just my wife and I are jerks, and they need no.
Lock them outside.
Common enemy is a great strategy.
Yeah.
Common enemy is a great strategy.
No.
The Herb Brooks strategy.
No, you know what it is? I think a lot of it was we did a lot of stuff together, right? We like board games, as a family. We kind of like, we can do that. We did vacations as a family kind of on a regular basis. But there was also sort of, one-on-ones, right? Like I like dinner with one kid at a time so that they kind of get their own, sort of time with dad or mom. And, college tours, it's always just one of them, and either my wife and I or just me. But I think most of it was just that. And then we lived in a house growing up. Now my house is much bigger, but like when they were younger, we didn't have enough bedrooms for all the kids. So they roomed together. So there's 2 of them that shared a room at any given time. And that changed actually, because my aging is girl, boy, boy, girl. So, 26, 24, 22, and then, 15. So sometimes the girls were shared and sometimes the boys shared, and sometimes actually the boys and the girls shared. And that, like did more than anything I could have done. It was like a room swap. I did this in my fraternity, by the way. And it wasn't something that I studied, but like in my fraternity, at MIT, we had triples and you change roommates every semester. So you basically had, between 6 and 8 roommates, 6 and 8 changes. And so you got to live with a bunch of different people, and, living with them is a little different than having food at the dining room table and stuff like that. Because you got to learn their habits or whatever. I actually think that had the biggest impact, more than just, board games and vacations. I think they just got really comfortable sharing a room and talking to each other or whatever, or, kind of helping out and different age groups. And, so they're tight.
That's cool. What's it like raising kids that just have such a different economic situation from you?
Yeah.
Like what they're growing up with versus what you grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real challenge, right? You want to provide the appropriate advantages for your kids without destroying their drive.
Right.
That is super important. So one thing is you don't get everything you want, right? Like, there's a limit. If you want above and beyond, you go get a job, so that's important. And all of my kids, by the way, have worked in retail. Massive life lessons by working in retail. You get people who are just angry humans, and you just got to deal with it. Even though you didn't do anything to put them in that state, they're just pissed off. So, that's like been really kind of beneficial to like giving them some sense of perspective, I guess is the best thing. Paid for their college, right? I mean, that's a lot, right? The loans and everything like that. But they were driven, right, by that point. So I think that they kind of knew what they wanted to get to. And, I encourage them to volunteer, right? Volunteering is one of those things where you can see, it gives you perspective.
Right.
Going overseas gives you perspective. We didn't do a lot of that, but like, you go overseas, you guys were in that organization that, like that gives you a whole new perspective on the rest of the world and what's going on. And then, I think pets help actually, in a huge way. I think having dogs and cats around the house kind of gives you a sense of having some sort of responsibility, but also like it's a perspective that
Totally.
is unlike any human to human conversation. So all my kids like love dogs and love, cats. And it is really like you don't have to do like pets take care of a bunch of parenting. It's so crazy. As I know it sounds so ridiculous to say that, but it's
no,
true.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any situations where you really had to correct on this? Like there's the nightmare scenario where you have this kid who's, Dad, you're asking me to do this, but I know I don't have to, like, why are you making me work? Why are you making me do this stuff when I know what you do. I know we have the means. Like, did you ever have to really course correct, or was this so ingrained?
I mean,
that...
I got to be candid with you guys. I didn't have sort of a lot of real life-changing wealth, all my life. Most of my kids' childhood was modest wealth, so I didn't really have to go through and say like, hey, my friend's got a Tesla. Why don't I have a Tesla in high school or whatever? I mean, I didn't have any of those kinds of scenarios. And frankly, you gotta understand, kids teach each other, which is amazing. So pay a lot of attention to that first one. And if you have 4, the first couple, because they kind of just teach each other. It's I don't even know my 4th one's name. Like like there's somebody else is taking care of her. So, and she gets a lot of, oh my God, like ridiculous amount of parenting from the other 3. It's awesome, right? Like to see it. Because they're just like, hey, what is this crappy grade here? Like, you got to get to a good school so you can get a good job. And like, I don't even have to say that. I mean, that is so awesome. Like, that's why I love AI. Eventually AI is going to do all my parenting for me. It's going to be fantastic.
What is your approach and view on your kids' connection to India and to to that part of the kind of the family history, because they're very close. You said you were born there. So how did you think about and how did you act on that part of their life?
Not really well. My wife's she was born in America and Polish lineage, but like born in America. Her parents were born in America. Her grandparents were not, but and so your kids learn lessons from people who are around. I wasn't around a lot, so I didn't teach a lot about India, so kind of delinquent on that part. I think they're really curious, and so we will eventually go there. It's not been something that my wife really wants to, is like dying to do or anything like that. So I think, most of the vacations and trips that we take and dialogue that we have is more aligned around, things that most of us are comfortable with, all of us are comfortable with. But, it's odd because, I went to high school with my wife. She was 2 years younger than me. So, I went to college, and then, 2 years later she gets into MIT as well. And, and then we start, basically building a much stronger relationship. One of my daughter, my oldest daughter, she's still dating, she's like a few years out of college now. She's still dating her boyfriend from high school, and he's Indian actually. So she's actually more Indian than I am. Like, she knows all the stuff, and, and I was raised in this country, and my kids, I got crazy stories about arranged marriages and stuff that I can tell you, but that's more a me pod than it's a dad pod thing. So we're gonna avoid those stories. But yeah, I've been pretty delinquent about that. So, they know about Hinduism, but they don't really know how to practice it. They're Catholics because my wife's Catholic, and so you got to balance this stuff, right? Like I can't come home for 15 minutes and spend time kind of regurgitating history about India. I have to focus on the things that are happening in the moment.
How did you think about with your wife? Like, how did you land on who was going to teach what, or how the family was going to connect with what, coming from two different places, two different countries,
Yeah.
Or was it just you're gone, so that piece is just kind of not happen. She's here, so her background is going to be a little bit more prevalent, or
I think the balancing act is really a tough one. I think the reality is she should be on this podcast doing the dad pod, because she was a dad more than I was a dad sometimes. I travel a lot, but the reality is the core things we were really kind of tight on. We always wanted 4 children, right? Like, this was like dating in high school kind of time. It was like, it's 4 kids, and it's like kind of been with us, and we're really, technical family, right? Like, even though she hates technology, it's really bizarre. She finished MIT in 3 years, highest grade in every class. Wow. Super smart. Hates technology, like literally hates it. If something breaks, she's like, go fix it. Like, this is not my thing. But we agreed on the big stuff and up front, and I think the stuff that was in the moment we would talk about, and I think kind of lean toward, whatever she preferred mostly, unless I had super strong opinions, because the reality is, like, you think all this stuff is going to be super important as they get raised, and it's not. I have these tip section I was going to give you, but like, one of the most important lessons that I think parents should know about is that your kids are always watching and listening. And I think it's a great story about this. It was a friend of mine. It's actually one of the reasons I left Lucent. I didn't love the job, and tailwinds and headwinds aside, I didn't love the job at the time. So it was another guy, and he was running, North American sales, and I was running international sales, for the business. And he comes in one day and he goes, he looks like he's gobsmacked, like somebody's just like hit him over the side of the head. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, my kids are about to go to college, and I was just having kids at the time. And I asked my son, like, what does he want to do for a living? Like, what kind of career does he want to have? And he said, I'm not sure, Dad, but I don't want to do what you do. And he was like blown away. Like, he was floored when his kid said that. And he said, like, I've never told him I didn't like my job. And I've never said anything but good things about my company and everything. But like, he sees it. Like, they could see right through you, right? And so your kids are always watching and listening. And, I remember my daughter rolling her eyes at me when I made a comment. And I was like, I don't even know. I was like, you got to, like, minimum SAT score to get into a good college. Or she's rolling her eyes like, that was back when you were a kid 500 years ago, right? And then later I overhear her repeating the same lesson to her friend, right? I mean, so they're watching you, they're listening to you. And so I think, like, more than anything else, like, live like you want your kids to live. And, that's the strongest lesson you can give a child. And I think when you live in a way, and sometimes you have to live a different way, right? You just don't have the opportunities, and you make it work. But that make it work lesson, sits with them. Like, my dad made it work. I'm going to make it work, right? Like, I took risk. I changed jobs. I went to startups. I went to venture capital. I've never kind of rested on anything. And they watch it, right? And they learn it, right? So a lot of it is, decisions you think are massive and really important, but really the most important thing is to live a good life. And just, you're human, so you can make mistakes, sure, but like, how do you recover from that? How do you become, just, if you're focused on an objective, how does that sort of foster?
I couldn't agree more. Like, I literally, hearing you say that, I had goosebumps. I have on my whiteboard over here a line that I wrote, a number. I think I wrote it when Leona was born. It says, "Live life the way I'd want Zeke and Leona to live their lives." And it comes from exactly, what you're saying. What I took from watching and being a part of my family had very little to do with what my parents told me about their job. It had everything to do about me watching them.
Yeah.
As my parents.
Yeah.
As they were going through it. We've touched on this a little bit, but you have this kind of core lesson or principle of perseverance. You obviously have worked your ass off throughout your life. I think we've talked about a lot of the successes, but what are some of the harder things? What are some of the failures when you look back as you were trying to balance this high impact life with your family?
Yeah, there's so many. I don't even know where to start. I didn't take any time off after having each of my kids. That's just nuts, right? There's a huge burden, sort of on my wife, and missing events and award ceremonies that were meaningful, like, to my kids at the time, right? So, just, you try to explain it, but like, they're not going to get it because, and they shouldn't have to get it. You should just show up, right? And be there. Those are important. And I think, kind of failed at doing that, right? And go backward, I probably would change those moments. I think I had this belief that every single day, or there were just too many events in my career that I perceived as being super important that actually weren't.
Right.
And, that was the balancing act that I was really bad at. I was just like, oh man, I have to go to that meeting because, this person's going to be there, could change the trajectory of my startup, because I started 3 companies, so, or like, I got to go to this, international trip because, 2,000 people are going to be in the audience listening to a talk I'm giving or whatever. And, out of that, my career is going to kind of move, and, there's like key audiences. And I think the lesson I've taught myself, and I'm still teaching, frankly, to this day, is that, like, all of those aren't super important. And sometimes you can, sort of just, your career is going to go fine without having to sort of take every single, like, what's perceived as an important meeting, because some of them just aren't. And I think people understand. I think that's like the biggest failure I think I made, which was erring on the side of, hey, I got to go do this because, this could be our next big deal. It could be my next, I could land my next investor. I could get my new VP of X. I could, whatever. And I think they would have just come in anyway, or not. And so, like, probably should have just done more with the kids and made them feel like they were as important as anything else.
When you were traveling and then you come back, did you have any challenges or specific strategies to make sure that you were still kind of fostering the fatherly relationship?
Yeah.
Because like, it's like you're gone and it's like, you're gone, now you come back and you're telling me what to do. I'm just, I'm curious how.
Nah, my wife
even
was
just
really
having
good at that.
less time.
She would be just like, your dad's going to be home. And so it was really she had like a list. You need to yell at this kid for this. And, you need to yell at this kid for this. And this one's expecting to get punished. And so, so she kind of made me the heavy. because it was easier for her. Like even she was the heavy though. She was definitely the heavy, but she.
But that could also cause a challenge in the relationship for you.
Look, I did.
You know
I'm
I mean?
my superpower in life is my energy. That's the truth. And
Can vouch for that. Witness.
I have a lot of it, and I'm just kind of like
Lots.
binary on it. And it's actually a double-edged sword, right? Like I am super present. When I'm in the room, I'm in the room. And when I'm not in the room, well, that's when I get into trouble because sometimes I need to be in the room, or like, what, you didn't get that text message? I was like, I was in the room, like I'm just talking to somebody. So when I got home, I would do weird things, right? Like with my kids, like sure, give them lessons. Then I'd stay up and I'd manufacture stories. Like this was like, my kids still remember this today, right? It's like, I was a big, I'm a nerd. I played a lot of D&D, and when I was a kid, and I don't play it anymore, but I kind of like it. But one of my kids does. He really likes it. But I had this whole like chain of characters and everything like that. I was a dungeon master, and so like I go home and rather than reading books, I would make up a book and I would make up a chapter every night. And I was really good at it. I was just it was like, it would help me. I was creative. I would tell the story about this character. My two boys were like glued to it. They were just like, oh my God. Like, what's going to happen to this? Trellius was one character. Riento was the other character. And it's like, it was like a story was intertwined. And I was like Game of Thrones stuff. I would like move to one to the other. Like, no, like Red Wedding shit. But like, it was just like, it was...
Not till they turned 16.
Yeah. So I would tell the
High
story.
school days.
And then, like one day, I was kind of getting tired of this storyline. So I like killed the character off. Like I was like, it was like a glorious ending, but he died and they buried him and everything. And it was just sad, his funeral and everything like that. And they freaked out, right? Like I said, I gotta go. And they're like, no. Yeah. And they were just like, I don't know how old they were, maybe like 8 and 10 maybe, or maybe it was 8 and 6. I don't remember. And they were, sitting in bed and they just didn't sleep the whole night. I was like the opposite of what I wanted to. And they're like, no, he couldn't have died. Like, that's like, what's really happening? I was like, and like all day. So the next day, I had to revive him. Like, I literally like, it was all a fake, like and the bookstore. So, like, yes, I was a heavy, I'd come home and my wife would be like this. I did crazy stuff like that, with, or I got a bunch of dry ice and, we kind of like saw what dry ice could do one day, and they were just like blown away. And my wife's like, "You're gonna burn them," and I was like, "No, I won't burn them." And what's dry ice burn?
Don't
it's
touch
not that bad, it's a finger, right? It's like so, but like they love that, and so there's a little bit of creativity in it. And so as we got older, the mobile era happened, and kids got mobile phones, so you could text them. Now the crazy thing now is. For my boys, they don't really respond to text messaging. I mean, one of them does, the other doesn't. It's Discord. And so you get on Discord because it's a gaming platform. And so I can see when their presence is, and we talk on Discord.
Wow.
You go to where your kids are, right? So I think technology has made it easier. Plus, I'm just a little bit crazy or a lot crazy. Mm-hmm. So, you bring energy to the table. All of a sudden, you're not necessarily just the bad guy. You do crazy, fun stuff, and kids love that.
One of the consistent messages we've heard from people who are very still active in their career, and it may take them travel, but it certainly takes energy and their attention investment, is that you can do that and still have a great relationship with your kids if when you come home you are all in on them,
mm-hmm.
or you
really
definitely you have a reflective investment in that.
You got to be all in. Now, my kids are older, right? Like I got 3 that are out of college and working now. So mm-hmm. That's just easier now to do that. Mm-hmm. But you got to be all in, right? Like when you get home, that's kind of why I think I'm still married, and and my kids don't hate me. Is because. When I got home, I'm just an in the moment guy. And when I have a lot of energy. So like, I don't care if I've been on an overnight flight, I acclimate quickly to the time zone and I'm just there. I'm not the guy that sits on the couch and is like, don't bother me. I was just on a flight for 4 days, or, I just had meetings back to back to back to back and I need to recharge at home. I'm charged. Like, the battery's full and let's just go. So that's good. The thing I can't do is the continuity oriented stuff. Wasn't a soccer coach. I was a soccer coach for a little while, but like that was hard. That took a lot of like effort to like plan and make that happen. But that's just not, I'm not going to be that soccer dad, that kind of goes to every game or, is coaching on the sidelines or assistant coaching on the sideline. That's just not who I was.
You've talked a little bit about it, but could you just zoom in to the relationship between you and your wife and talk about how you literally ran your family?
It helped that we were together for a long time, right? I mean, we dated.
That's incredible.
Dated in high
That's
school.
really incredible.
Yeah. It's mostly her, so I take no credit. I mean, I'll take a tiny bit of credit for it, just because I'm a good-looking, short man. So, no. No,
a lot of secrets to share there as well.
What's that?
A lot of secrets to share there as well.
Yeah. We've been through a ton together, right? Like, knew each other in high school, like, parents, I know her parents really well, like, went to college together. She knows all my fraternity brothers, all my friends. We worked together in the same building. I, kicked her in the head in the stairwell, She was a model. I had her pictures in my office, and I got a complaint from HR, like somebody said he's got pinups in his office. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, they're like, they come in and I'm like, is it picture of my wife, modeling? They're like, right there. I was like, that's my wife. And she works in this building. You want to bring her in? And they're like, no, it's okay. It's like they walked out like, we fucked up. I don't know. Like, what is it? You're not allowed to have pictures of your family on your desk? I mean, what kind of place is this? So we went through that. And then, so we worked together for 5 years, maybe even almost 10, right? And then I did the whole startup thing. That really helped about it. So that's a tip. I also feel like, when I'm home now and even with her, like super dedicated to like, and attentive, to her needs and desires, because she's taken on a lot, right? Because sometimes I've gone a week at a time, or like 3-4 days, and I'm kind of a weekend, husband, if you will. And so like, that's super important. And, I've screwed up a bunch in terms of like, not being responsive or not calling every day. And, we work on things that are going to make that work better. Just because if you don't call for 3 days, then that first day you're just catching up or you're just trying to figure out how to, get her not to be angry. So, it's like, okay, I brought home a nice apple pie, So the relationship with her is just, we have so much longevity and, sort of history that it allows me to get away with being, not as good as I should be. And then the other thing is, I'm a big believer in working at it, right? You just got to work at it. Like just with anything else, any relationship that you have in life, you have to work at it. Work on yourself. You got to work on your relationships. You got to work on, goals that you have. And, I try to be like more focused on her and like what the objective that she has when I'm home and less so when I'm away. It's just, that's kind of the way it is. I wish it was easier to, to give you tips. Like we have
do you do that?
We have a whiteboard.
At the expense. I'm curious, because you're mentioning, really focusing on her, and then you've mentioned, really being, just bringing the energy to the kids. How then do you fit yourself and your kind of your own care and your own needs into that whole picture?
Yeah, it's a good question. I derive a lot of energy with being with people. So, my self-care is built around 3 or 4 principles. Like I work out every day, so, I find time to do that. It doesn't have to be a lot, like 20 to 40 minutes, right? Like anybody can find 20 to 40 minutes from that perspective. And that's a really balancing thing for me. Like, hormonally, it kind of like just evens you out and you're not too energized or too, tired or anything like that. I do derive a lot of energy from being around people. I like to generate a lot of energy, but I also receive a lot from being with people. So my self-care is not that, I'm not worried about that. Like when I come home, I'm not sitting there saying like, I got to take care of a bunch of stuff. Because, basically my job is what I love doing, which is, talking to people and learning and seeing technology work in weird ways. And I'm energized every day from that standpoint. I'm energized from working out. And then my other little tip is I don't know how I did this, but I didn't take classes or anything. I'm a really good masseuse. So I do give my wife massages pretty much every time we're together. And I
feel like this needs to be validated. I can't tell if this is
no,
bullshit or not.
this is totally like, you can ask her. I'm very good. And so
that's incredible.
Like that, like we're watching TV and she's getting a massage. And I think that has literally been the thing that saved our marriage. I'm pretty darn good at it. I give like the hand massages and, like whatever, little things. It's just, it says I love you. It says, I know you've done a lot. Like, here's something. Anyway,
that's super cool.
Those are my like marriage tips. Everybody can't do that. Everybody can't have energy. So I think I feel like I'm not giving any lessons to anybody. Energy is something that, either you have or you don't, but like.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I think everyone could find 5 minutes. Every husband could find 5 minutes to give their partner a massage at the end of the night.
Yes.
So like, I think that there's actually, and it's tactile. It's building the connection that way. It's a way to show your appreciation and love rather than throwing more, words to the wind. I actually, I think that's a really good.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. They're not 5 minutes. They're like an hour. So it's not trivial.
It's actually. It's part of Raju's workout regime.
No, it kind of is. I got strong hands now. But it starts with like.
I mentioned during your self-care section.
Yeah, no, it starts with like.
There's a lot for us to.
I don't want anything to do with you, and so like I'll grab her hands, I'll give her a hand massage, and then like an hour later she's happy and we're talking again.
As you had kids and your kids are growing up, did the kids force you? Either personally or in your relationship, did it force you to deal with certain stuff? Like, were there negative qualities that maybe you had to tone down? Or in the relationship, was there like, hey, we got some unresolved stuff that if to make this work, we need to resolve?
Yeah.
Can you think of anything along those lines?
I like drinking a lot. And so, there's been moments I regret where I drank too much and I said stupid stuff to my kids. I know them. I can still remember them. They're just like, it's like a dagger in my heart. Like I said something to my son that was just stupid. It hindered our relationship. Like he just, it was hurt. He was hurt. So I toned that down, right? Like that's one thing where like, I love drinking 90% of the time, not that it happens so much, but if I drank too much with friends or whatever, it's fine. But like occasionally, like it's just bad. And so I don't need it, and it's unhealthy now. I'm older in life. And so, like that, I think I toned down a bit, a lot actually. I said, I don't need it. I enjoyed life without drinking. And, if I drink, I drink with my kids now. So it's great. It's fantastic and in moderation. So that's fun. Other things, I think my wife and I, there are always issues that are unresolved that, get aired in public with the kids. I don't think that's bad. Like, I don't think that's bad. I think my kids hate it, right? They're like, oh, we just like, can you guys just not, we're just trying to enjoy this, dinner or whatever. But, I think they got to see conflict just as much as they got to see passion. And
totally agree.
Yeah, like you don't want to say really bad things, right? Like, but you can fight. I don't think that's bad. I think if you're fighting all the time, that creates a problem. But like, just airing out your differences.
Well, I think it creates an unrealistic image if you don't show the whole picture of what a relationship is, particularly mother, father, husband, wife.
Yeah.
It's impossible to go that long and work that much with someone without having disagreement, without having some dust ups.
And I also think it can make children very avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's not a model of how to have healthy disagreement, it makes disagreement a lot scarier.
Yeah, it does.
You don't know what happens at the end.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it. The last question we love to ask everybody. You've been giving great advice along the way, but if you had one piece of advice you haven't shared yet for somebody who's about to become a dad, what would it be?
I have a few.
Could be more than one.
Okay, fine. One, it doesn't make you a bad father if you don't enjoy every stage of your child's development. So, that is really important to internalize. Some fathers just don't like, you got to do it, but, they don't like changing diapers. They're not the Florence Nightingale type of dad. Others, they kind of enjoy when their kids start moving. It's just I don't want to use a pet comparison, but, it's a little bit like, you got a companion kind of thing. Others enjoy their kids when they can be, a teacher. And you can teach them baseball and teach them spelling, whatever, right? Math. Others are really good dads when they can be friends with their kids and, share their personal issues, not act like a dad, just act like, we're friends, and went to a bar. So I think that the reality is, it's your kid and you will be a good dad in 99.9% of the case. And don't beat yourself up if you don't love a stage. It's okay. That stage was going to move on. There'll be other stages out there. So just, kind of tolerate it sometimes. The second is nothing makes your kids angrier than if their friends like you. That's just that would just pisses them off. And it's just this secret tip I have. I'm just look, I'm lucky to do the job that I do. I get to see Discord. I get to see, I just made an investment in something called a vinyl shop in Shibuya, which is synthetic music company. It's really cool. By the founder is the number 3 guy from Spotify who left. And, that's the cool dad. Oh shit, he's working on synthetic music. I can blend Kanye and Taylor Swift together. And I talk to, my daughter's friends about it and she's and she hears it all the time, but now I'm talking to the friends and friends are hooked on my words. Or, I love anime. And, my kids are all my sons really like it. Actually, my older daughter does too. My younger doesn't as much. But I've got the cool anime shirts Jujutsu Kaisen. That's a great one. If you haven't watched Jujutsu Kaisen, go watch it. Number 1 anime ever of all time. And so I'm wearing this Jujutsu Kaisen shirt, and we're going out, and my daughter's friends are there, and my daughter's friends oh my god, Dad's got a Jujutsu Kaisen shirt on, JJK. And she's talking to me, and we're becoming friends. And all of a sudden, my daughter's what the fuck just happened here? My friends are friends with my dad. That is, oh, that's God. Amazing. And then the last one is just a massive yes to dad jokes. Just do your dad jokes. I actually read an article. I saw an article that said it's actually really good for child development, dad jokes. I think it's a big lie, frankly, but maybe a dad that's a real dad joke and you're just forwarding it, but subtle. But yeah, do dad jokes. It's almost like a rite of passage, right? You just gotta do your dad jokes. And I've been doing them for years. And so I've been lucky because I've invested in a lot of companies, and I tell my dad jokes even to my founders, and they kind of have to laugh because I just gave them a lot of money. You know what I mean? It's just so it's fantastic. So I have 15 children. So anyway, it's awesome. Those are my tips. Those are the things that, anyway, I'm the worst dad out there. So just number 1, put me out there and say this is bottom of the barrel. You're going to be better than this. So it gives hope to aspiring fathers that are challenged. And, I've done a lot of things that, I probably do it differently if I could. But, you know, at the end of the day, you got to work at the relationships with your kids. You got to work at the relationships with your wife. You got to bring a lot of energy to the table and, you know, do what you love, persevere, all those things, right? Those, because more than anything about teaching your kids, they're going to see you and they're going to be like, Dad's not a bad guy. So let me, if I can follow in his footsteps or do what he did, you know, life's good.
Well, with that, I want to thank you so much, Raju, for being a fantastic guest here on the Dad Pod. Appreciate you making the time. There's been a ton that we covered today. I think folks are going to learn a lot and hopefully laugh a lot too. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Before you bounce, I have a quick favor. Please subscribe to the pod. Not only does Luke love juicing those numbers, but it really does help put this thing in front of more dads.
And Mike, on the other hand, just loves juicing. We also now run a listener community on WhatsApp. To join, visit dadpod.fm and you'll see the delicious link at the top of the homepage.
Come on in, baby. We'd love to have you.